They crave closeness, but their nervous system interprets closeness as danger. And that one sentence explains the whole tragedy, because from the outside it looks like contradiction. It looks like mixed signals. It looks like someone saying they want love, and then running the moment love arrives. But inside their body, inside the emotional wiring they've carried for years, closeness doesn't register as comfort first. It registers as risk, and when something feels like risk, the survival system does what it was built to do. It protects, it pulls back, it creates distance, even if that distance costs them the very thing they want. You have to understand that for many avoidants, the craving is real. They want the warmth of being chosen. They want the security of someone who stays. They want the softness of a relationship where they can exhale and not perform. They want intimacy, not just physical, but emotional, the kind where you can be seen and still loved. They want it, and they also don't trust it. Because wanting something doesn't mean your body knows how to hold it. And if a person grew up learning that love was inconsistent, or conditional, or overwhelming, or tied to criticism, or tied to abandonment, then closeness becomes a place where pain is expected, even if the current person standing in front of them is gentle. So when you come close, when you become steady, when you start to feel like home, something inside them starts to panic, not because you're wrong, but because you're real. Real love doesn't allow the same old coping strategies. Real love asks them to be present, to be accountable, to be emotionally available, to be seen in moments where they'd rather hide. And being seen is terrifying to someone who learned that being seen leads to being hurt. So their nervous system misreads you. It misreads your consistency as pressure. It misreads your questions as criticism. It misreads your needs as demands. It misreads your love as a trap, because to them, closeness has always come with a cost. This is why they can be incredible in the beginning. In the beginning, the distance is built in. In the beginning, the uncertainty feels normal. In the beginning, they can give you charm, attention, chemistry, and even tenderness, because the attachment hasn't fully activated yet. They still feel in control. They still feel like they can leave at any time. But then you get closer. You start building routines. You start expecting consistency. You start leaning in with real feelings. And the closer you get, the more their body starts sounding an alarm. Because now it feels like there is something to lose, and losing feels unbearable. So they try to prevent loss by creating distance before the bond can deepen. And you feel it. You feel the shift. You feel the warmth become inconsistency. You feel the messages slow down. You feel them suddenly busy. You feel them start to pull away after a beautiful moment, as if intimacy has a hangover. You feel them go quiet right when you thought you were finally safe. And you start doing what loving people do. You start reaching. You start asking what's wrong. You start trying to reassure them. You start trying to prove you're not like the ones who hurt them. You start offering more softness, more patience, more understanding, because you think love will calm fear. But here is the painful part. Sometimes your love is exactly what triggers it, because love demands presence, and presence demands vulnerability, and vulnerability feels like danger to them. So the more you care, the more you invest, the more you show them this is real, the more their nervous system tries to regain control by pulling away. Not because they don't want you, but because they don't know how to hold you without feeling overwhelmed. Not because you're too much, but because intimacy activates an old story inside them that says, if you need someone, you will be disappointed. If you open up, you will be rejected. If you relax, you will be abandoned. This is why avoidants often ruin the relationships they crave. They don't ruin it with one big decision. They ruin it with small withdrawals. A delayed reply here, a cancelled plan there, a moment of coldness after warmth, a refusal to talk about feelings, a shutdown when things get serious. And each time it looks small, it looks manageable, it looks like something you can fix, something you can be patient with. But over time, those small withdrawals create a relationship where you are always reaching and they're always retreating, where you become the emotional manager and they become the emotional escape artist. And love cannot grow in a place where one person is always running from the very closeness that love requires. And I want you to hear this with compassion, because it matters. Avoidants are not always calculating. They're not always playing games. Many of them are genuinely confused by their own behavior. They can miss you while they ignore you. They can love you while they distance themselves. They can crave your presence while resenting the responsibility that presence brings. And that confusion can make you blame yourself, because you think, if they miss me, why don't they come close? If they love me, why do they shut down? If they want a relationship, why do they sabotage it? And the answer is not that you are unlovable. The answer is that love is activating a fear system that was trained long before you arrived. But compassion does not mean you sacrifice yourself. Understanding does not mean you accept pain as the price of love. Because while their nervous system may interpret closeness as danger, your nervous system experiences their distance as danger too. You start walking on eggshells. You start questioning your worth. You start shrinking your needs. You start overthinking. You start waiting for the next withdrawal. And this is where the relationship becomes tragic for you, because you end up becoming the container for their fear, while nobody is containing your heartbreak. The most heart-touching truth is this: you cannot love someone into safety if they refuse to do the work of becoming safe. You cannot be so gentle that it rewires their survival response. You can create a healthy environment, you can offer consistency, you can communicate with kindness, but the moment they feel triggered, they have to choose courage. They have to choose to stay present. They have to choose to speak instead of shut down. They have to choose to feel discomfort without running. And if they don't, then the relationship will always be built around their fear, and your love will always be asked to pay the bill. So if you are the one who keeps wondering what you did wrong, I need you to release that question. You did not create their fear. You did not invent their shutdown. You did not make closeness dangerous. You simply brought real intimacy to a heart that was trained to treat intimacy like a threat. And your job is not to heal their wiring by breaking yourself into smaller pieces. Your job is to stay loyal to your own peace, to choose a love that can meet you, to choose a relationship where closeness feels safe on both sides, where love doesn't trigger distance, where your presence is not something they can only tolerate in small doses, but something they can honor, protect, and hold. Avoidants don't fear love, they fear what love demands. And that is why so many relationships with them feel like standing at the edge of something beautiful, while the person you want to build it with keeps stepping back. Because love, real love, is not just a feeling, it is a responsibility. It asks for consistency, and consistency means you can't disappear when you're overwhelmed. It asks for accountability, and accountability means you can't hide behind excuses when you hurt someone. It asks for emotional exposure, and emotional exposure means you can't keep your heart locked away while still expecting someone else to keep theirs open. And it asks for the loss of control, because intimacy is the one place where you cannot fully control how you are seen, how you are needed, and how much you might be affected. This is why an avoidant can be so present at the start, when things are light, when the stakes are low, when there is still room to escape without consequence. In the beginning, love feels like choice. It feels like freedom. It feels like attraction and fun and possibility. But as soon as love begins to require something, as soon as it begins to ask for a decision, a deeper presence, a steadier effort, something inside them starts to resist. Not because the love isn't real, but because the demands of love activate the part of them that has learned to survive by staying self-contained. A person who fears what love demands will often seem confident on the surface because they are good at independence. They know how to handle life alone. They know how to keep it together. They know how to stay composed. And that strength can be seductive because it feels stable, it feels mature. It feels like someone who won't fall apart. But what you eventually discover is that the same independence that makes them impressive is also the wall that keeps you out. They can give you attention, they can give you chemistry, they can give you moments of tenderness. But when the relationship asks for emotional accountability, when it asks for deeper truth, when it asks for consistency, that's when the doors begin to close. Because consistency is not just texting back. It is the promise that you are not alone in this. It is the reassurance that you do not have to earn someone's presence by guessing their mood. It is the safety of knowing that love won't disappear the moment you need something real. And for an avoidant, consistency can feel like captivity because it means they can't retreat without impact. It means their actions have consequences. It means someone is counting on them emotionally. And that kind of dependence can feel like a threat to their identity because they may have built their whole sense of safety around not needing anyone and not being needed. Accountability is another demand they often fear. Accountability requires humility. It requires owning the moment you didn't show up, the moment you went cold, the moment you shut down, the moment you hurt someone by withholding. And that can feel unbearable for someone who already carries shame. Many avoidants are not proud of their patterns. They just don't know how to face them. So instead of saying, "You're right, I disappeared, and I'm sorry," they protect themselves with defensiveness, with silence, with minimizing. They say you're overthinking. They say you're asking for too much. They say you're too sensitive. Because if they can make your needs the problem, they don't have to confront their lack of courage. Emotional exposure is the most intimate demand of all, because it asks them to reveal what they've spent years hiding. It asks them to admit they care. It asks them to admit they miss you. It asks them to admit they need reassurance too. It asks them to say, "I'm scared," instead of acting distant. And to someone who has learned that vulnerability is weakness, that kind of exposure feels like stepping into fire. So they keep it vague. They keep it casual. They keep it undefined. They give you enough to keep you close, but not enough to make them feel fully seen. And then there is control. Control is the secret addiction underneath avoidance. Not control in a cruel way, but control as safety. If they can control the pace, the closeness, the availability, they feel less likely to be hurt. If they can decide when things get serious, they feel less likely to be trapped. If they can keep you slightly uncertain, they feel less likely to be abandoned, because they can tell themselves they never fully leaned in. And this is the heartbreak for you, because love cannot grow where one person is always keeping the emergency exit open. This is why you can feel like you are always doing emotional math. You're calculating your tone, your timing, your words. You're trying to ask for what you need without sounding like you need it. You're trying to bring up concerns without triggering shutdown. You're trying to be honest without being too much. And slowly, you start shaping yourself around their fear. You start lowering your standards to keep the peace. You start accepting inconsistency as normal. You start calling crumbs effort, because you're afraid that if you ask for more, they'll disappear. That is what happens when someone fears what love demands. They make you feel like love is something you must earn by becoming smaller. But the truth is, love is not supposed to feel like a negotiation for basic care. Love is not supposed to make you question your worth. Love is not supposed to punish you for having needs. Love is supposed to be a place where your nervous system can rest. And if every time you ask for clarity they withdraw, if every time you ask for consistency they go cold, if every time you ask for emotional honesty they shut down, then what you are experiencing is not a lack of love, it is a lack of capacity. And this is the most tender truth you can hold. Someone can love you and still not be able to meet you. Someone can miss you and still not choose the work required to keep you. Someone can crave intimacy and still sabotage it because they are terrified of its demands. And your heart, being loyal and hopeful, will try to interpret their fear as a reason to stay. You will tell yourself they just need time. You will tell yourself your love will soften them. You will tell yourself if you are patient enough, they will finally feel safe. But safety is not something you can give to someone who refuses to face themselves. Safety is a choice they have to make, in their own behavior, in their own communication, in their own willingness to stay present when it's uncomfortable. And if they don't choose it, you will keep paying for their comfort with your anxiety, your self-esteem, your peace. So hear me clearly, you are not asking for too much when you ask for consistency. You are not needy when you ask for accountability. You are not dramatic when you ask for emotional presence. Those are not luxury items in love, they are the foundation. And if someone fears what love demands, they may keep taking from you while avoiding the very things that make love real. That is not a reflection of your worth, it is a reflection of their fear. Your power is in remembering this. You do not have to prove you're lovable enough for someone to meet you. You do not have to audition for stability. You do not have to keep explaining your needs like they are optional. You get to choose a love that doesn't run from responsibility, a love that doesn't treat vulnerability like danger, a love that shows up not only when it's easy, but when it matters. They protect themselves with distance. But distance becomes the weapon that slowly kills the relationship. And the most heartbreaking part is that they often don't even realize they're doing it while it's happening, because to them, distance feels like safety. It feels like control. It feels like breathing room. It feels like the only way to quiet the panic that rises when love becomes real. But to you, distance feels like rejection. It feels like uncertainty. It feels like being punished for caring. And when one person calls distance peace, while the other person experiences it as pain, the relationship starts to bleed in silence. Distance doesn't always show up as a breakup. Sometimes it shows up as delays, a message left on read, a plan postponed, a conversation avoided, an emotional question answered with a joke, a tender moment followed by coldness, a beautiful night together followed by days of silence. And each time it happens, it doesn't look like a weapon. It looks like a phase, like stress, like business, like something you can forgive. But over time, the pattern becomes the relationship, and you start living inside a cycle where closeness is followed by withdrawal, And every withdrawal trains your nervous system to fear the next moment you start to feel safe. You begin to learn that warmth is temporary, that affection has an expiration date, that if you get too happy, too relaxed, too hopeful, something will shift and you will be left holding your feelings alone. And maybe you don't even say it out loud, maybe you try to be cool, but inside you start preparing for disappointment. You start rehearsing your pain, you start bracing, because you've been taught that love comes with sudden distance. And this is where the relationship begins to die, not in one dramatic moment, but in the slow erosion of trust, because trust is built on consistency, and distance breaks consistency. Trust is built on repair, and distance avoids repair. Trust is built on emotional presence, and distance removes presence. And when someone uses distance as their default response to discomfort, the relationship becomes a place where problems never get solved, they just get paused. You don't resolve conflict, you outlast it. You don't build intimacy, you survive the gaps. You don't feel held, you feel tolerated when it's convenient. And you, being a loving person, try to bridge the gap. You try to understand. You try to make it easier for them. You tell yourself they just need space, they just get overwhelmed, they just don't know how to express feelings. You soften your needs until they sound like suggestions. You learn to ask for the bare minimum with a smile, because you're afraid that if you ask for what you truly need, the distance will get worse. And without realizing it, you become the one maintaining the relationship's pulse, checking for signs of life, measuring your words, monitoring their mood, trying to keep the connection from slipping away. But the truth is, distance teaches you to abandon yourself. It teaches you to silence your needs. It teaches you to treat your longing like a burden. It teaches you to accept emotional hunger as normal. And the relationship dies the moment you start believing you have to suffer quietly to be loved. Because love cannot grow where one person is shrinking. Love cannot thrive where one person is always waiting. Love cannot be healthy where one person is always managing the other person's comfort at the cost of their own peace. Distance also creates a strange kind of power imbalance. The person who withdraws controls the temperature. They decide when the relationship is warm and when it is cold. They decide when you get closeness and when you get silence. And even if they're not doing it maliciously, the impact is the same. You start feeling like your emotional stability depends on their availability. You start treating their attention like oxygen. You start working for moments of connection like they are rewards. And that is not love, that is conditioning. Because every time they pull away and you chase, the pattern becomes stronger. Your chase tells them without words that distance works, that withdrawal brings you closer, that silence gives them control. And the more you chase, the more they feel crowded. The more they feel crowded, the more they withdraw. And the more they withdraw, the more you panic, and the cycle becomes a loop you can't think your way out of. A loop built on fear, not on mutual devotion. And here is what distance steals first, your voice. You stop saying what hurts, because it never goes anywhere. You stop asking for clarity, because it triggers shutdown. You stop naming patterns, because it leads to denial. You stop bringing your full self to the relationship, because your full self feels unwelcome. Then distance steals your joy. You can't fully enjoy the good moments, because you're waiting for the drop. You can't fully relax, because you've learned the relationship can change overnight. Then distance steals your dignity. You start accepting scraps. You start negotiating for basic respect. You start making excuses for behavior that would never be okay in a truly loving partnership. And while this is happening to you, the avoidant often convinces themselves they're doing what's necessary. They tell themselves they need space to think. They tell themselves they're protecting the relationship from conflict. They tell themselves you're too intense, too emotional, too demanding, when really, you're just trying to build something real. They don't realize that distance doesn't protect love, it prevents love. Because love requires showing up during discomfort, not disappearing from it. So the relationship dies in the places where you needed them, and they chose absence. It dies in the conversations you tried to have, and they avoided. It dies in the promises that were made to calm you down, not to change anything. It dies in the moments you felt alone while still technically together. And that kind of death is the hardest, because you can't point to one moment and say, this is when it ended. It ends slowly, over time, until one day you look at yourself and you realize you don't recognize the person you've become in the effort to keep the peace. And the saddest part is this: they often ruin the relationship they crave because distance becomes their comfort. But comfort is not love. Comfort is the familiar coping strategy that keeps them from growing. Comfort is the pattern that keeps them safe but lonely. And when they finally realize what distance cost them, when they finally feel the emptiness of a life where intimacy always slips away, that is when regret can appear, not because they didn't want love, but because they kept choosing the one thing that guaranteed they wouldn't have it. So if you are the one who has been surviving someone else's distance, remember this: closeness is not a crime. Needs are not a burden. Wanting consistency is not too much. Distance that keeps hurting you is not a small issue. It is the relationship telling the truth. And you deserve a love that doesn't punish you with silence, a love that doesn't disappear when things get real, a love that chooses presence, not distance, because presence is the only thing that keeps love alive. They often choose safe pain over risky love, because predictable loneliness feels safer than unpredictable intimacy. And if you have ever loved someone avoidant, you have felt the cold truth of that choice without them ever saying it out loud. You have watched them reach for distance the moment things got real. You have watched them turn down the very closeness they claim to want. You have watched them retreat into silence, into business, into, I don't know, into, I need space. And you have wondered how a person can miss you and still keep choosing a life that doesn't include you fully. Safe pain is the pain they already understand. It is familiar. It is organized. It is the kind of hurt they can predict, manage, and survive without feeling exposed. Safe pain is loneliness with rules. It is independence with control. It is the quiet ache of, I'm fine, that they can hide behind while the world applauds them for being strong. Risky love is different. Risky love is messy. It demands emotional honesty, which means they can't keep their fear hidden. Risky love requires trust, which means they have to let go of control. Risky love includes the possibility of disappointment, rejection, and loss, and for someone who has learned to survive by staying guarded, that possibility feels like standing on the edge of a cliff. So they choose the pain they can manage. They choose the emptiness they can predict. They choose to be the one who leaves first, because leaving first feels safer than being left. They choose to keep the connection half alive, because half alive means half exposed. They choose to sabotage, not because they enjoy hurting you, but because they are terrified of how much it would hurt if they let themselves fully need you and then lost you. And that fear can be so strong that they would rather guarantee loneliness than gamble on intimacy. This is why their behavior can look so confusing, because they can be warm and then cold, close and then distant, present and then gone. They can crave the tenderness of your love and still pull away from the responsibility that love brings. They can say they miss you while avoiding the conversations that would actually keep you. They can want the relationship, but only in a version that doesn't require them to be vulnerable. And when you love someone like this, you end up living in a constant state of emotional whiplash, because the moment you start to feel safe, they choose safe pain again. Safe pain shows up in small choices that slowly become a lifestyle. It shows up when they cancel plans at the last minute, not because they don't care, but because commitment makes them feel trapped. It shows up when they shut down during conflict, not because they don't have feelings, but because feelings make them feel powerless. It shows up when they avoid defining the relationship, not because they don't want you, but because definition makes the stakes real. It shows up when they keep you close enough to not lose you, but far enough to not feel overwhelmed. And every time they choose safe pain, they reinforce the belief that intimacy is dangerous and distance is protection. And you feel it on the other side. You feel yourself becoming careful. You feel yourself becoming smaller. You feel yourself editing your needs, because you can sense how quickly they withdraw when the relationship asks for depth. You start to choose your own version of safe pain too. You start to hold back your truth, because truth might push them away. You start to accept inconsistency, because demanding consistency might trigger their fear. You start to settle for partial love, because full love seems to cost too much. And that is where the relationship becomes heartbreaking, because their safe pain becomes your daily pain. The cruel irony is that risky love is what they crave. Deep down, they want to be held. They want to trust someone. They want to stop living in emotional self-defense. They want the peace of knowing someone will stay. But because they equate closeness with danger, they only feel safe when they are distant, and distance guarantees the very loneliness they are trying to avoid. So they keep repeating the same story. They get close, they get scared. They withdraw, they feel lonely. They miss you, they return. And the cycle starts again. And each cycle teaches them. See, love always ends in pain, while ignoring the fact that the pain often begins with their own retreat. This is why an avoidant can be haunted by regret later. Not always immediately, because at first the relief feels like proof that leaving was right. They feel calmer, and they assume calmer means healthier. But calm that comes from shutting down is not peace, it's numbness. Over time, numbness turns into emptiness, and emptiness turns into a quiet grief, because the human heart is not built to live without connection. They can distract themselves, they can stay busy, they can keep life productive, but there will be moments when the noise fades, and they will feel the truth, that the safest life they created is also the loneliest one, and that is when risky love starts to look different. They remember how your presence softened their world. They remember how it felt to be chosen. They remember your warmth, your patience, your steadiness. They remember the way you tried to build, the way you offered connection, not control. And they will realize something painful. That they didn't lose you because you weren't enough. They lost you because they kept choosing safe pain, again and again, until the person who loved them finally became too tired to keep reaching. But I need you to hear this too, because it's important for your healing. Their choice of safe pain is not a reflection of your worth. It does not mean your love was not valuable. It does not mean you were too much. It means they were afraid of what they felt. It means they were afraid of the responsibility of holding someone else's heart. It means they were afraid of being exposed, of being needed, of being seen in their imperfections. And fear can make people do tragic things like run from the very love they prayed for. Still, compassion cannot become your cage. Understanding cannot become your excuse to stay in a situation that keeps breaking you. Because while they may be choosing safe pain, you are allowed to choose safe love. Safe love is consistency. Safe love is emotional presence. Safe love is someone who can sit in discomfort and still communicate. Safe love is someone who doesn't punish your needs with silence. Safe love is someone who takes your heart seriously, not only when they are lonely, but every day. So if you are the one trying to interpret their distance, trying to decode their withdrawal, trying to earn their courage by being endlessly patient, I want you to remember this. Risky love is not something you can force someone into. They have to choose it. They have to decide that intimacy is worth the discomfort. They have to be willing to feel fear without turning it into abandonment. They have to be willing to show up when the relationship asks for more than chemistry. And if they are not willing, then the relationship will always be built around their avoidance, and your heart will always be the one paying the price. You deserve a love that does not treat closeness as danger. You deserve a love that does not choose loneliness because it is predictable. You deserve a love that takes the risk of intimacy because you are not a threat, you are a gift. And the right person will not choose safe pain over you. They will choose presence. They will choose growth. They will choose the kind of love that is brave enough to stay.